When I was 15, I developed an obsession with the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. Every Sunday, I'd take the number 2 train and stroll its grounds in a sort of fugue. I wouldn't see the old ladies with their walkers, the bearded hippies in the vegetable garden, or the Bangladeshi families in their Sunday best taking photos with their Instamatics. They didn't exist because I was strolling the grounds of my estate. I would listen to the birds, I would inhale the scent of wisteria, and I would gaze up at the walls of my manor house in the distance. For hours I'd perambulate in my imaginary tweed suit, hands clasped behind my back, smiling to myself, whistling quietly. Sometimes I'd slip a book from my pocket and I'd sit on a bench to read a few pages of a P.G. Wodehouse novel. Wodehouse provided much of the raw materials of my fantasies. He wrote 97 novels, comedies about the mishaps of ne'er-do-well members of well-connected families on weekends away in the country, and I read them all, scooping them off dusty shelves at the library or in second-hand bookshops. Now, this was Brooklyn in the 70s, and what's the first association you probably have with that time and place? Saturday Night Fever, right? John Travolta in a Kiana shirt gliding across the dance floor. That was not me. When I got to Princeton, a friend said Danny's grandfather made a deal with him. He'd pay his tuition if Danny agreed to wear his clothes. It was somewhat true. I did wear 3-piece suits for my grandfather, the German-born doctor with a Pakistani tailor, and many of my silk ties were his hand-me-downs. I went to Princeton because F. Scott Fitzgerald went there. I applied early decision, I got in, and I never visited another campus. Princeton had the ivy and the Gothic buildings, so I spent much of my first few years there in the same reverie that I'd attained in the Botanical Gardens, oblivious to the 1970s happening around me, intoxicated by history. At 15, I also inherited my mother's old typewriter, and I began a catalog of every book I read, publication dates, page counts, and summaries, all typed on index cards and stored in a metal box. I'd read about commonplace books in some Victorian novel, and I decided it was quite the thing for a gentleman to maintain, so I inaugurated one of my own, copying out piquant quotes from the books I was reading, festooned with marginalia. "Well said, rather insightful, what?" I was just odd. And now, 50 years later, I have a decent idea of why. I'd grown up in chaos. My mother's 3 marriages, 4 continents, and a dozen schools in multiple languages. I was born in England to an English father and an English-educated mother, but we left when I was 3. And P.G. Wodehouse's England felt more real to me than the actual country that I'd left behind. Every year I ended up in a new school in a new country with a new language, but one thing remained constant. I was always the odd new kid. But in my fantasy life, things were far more orderly. In Wodehouse's world, everyone knew exactly who they were and where they belonged. And by the final chapter, order was always restored. That's what I craved, a world that was safe and familiar and consistent. Now, in my dotage, I stroll the grounds of the Biltmore, past ridiculous mansions and their attendant Rolls Royces, back in my element. I mutter and whistle to myself and my dogs as I walk through my imaginary Arizona estate. Still odd, quite happy. I hope you found this helpful, and if you did, sign up for my free essays. I'll send you great advice like this every week. And subscribe to this channel. I put out new videos every week. And next, watch this.